Hey everyone, I'm Stephanie, and I believe that the right book at the right time can change lives, and that all readers should read children's literature, especially adults. So, that's what we do here on the KidLit Love podcast. We celebrate all things children's literature: picture books, early readers, middle grade, and young adult novels for readers of all ages. In each episode, we'll talk with children's literature authors and discuss their books, their hopes, their dreams for readers, their writing process, and much, much more. Whether you're an adult reading to their inner child or connecting the young readers in your life with fantastic books, you've come to the right place. So grab a notebook to build your TBR, and let's get to today's episode of KidLit Love. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the KidLit Love podcast. I'm Stephanie Affinito, your KidLit loving host, inviting you back to another bookish conversation with a children's literature author. Today, I'm talking with Korena DiRoma Howley. Korena is a freelance writer and editor who primarily reports on science news and education for multiple outlets. But she's here today to celebrate the release of her debut picture book, Sarang Saves the School. This book was inspired by true events in South Korea and shows readers it's never too late to fulfill a dream. It gave me full body goosebumps, listeners, at one particular part of the book, and I cannot wait to share it with you. So let's get right to the episode. Korena, welcome to KidLit Love. I'm so glad you're here today.
Thank you, Stephanie. I'm really happy to be here.
I wasn't kidding when I said full body goosebumps. I will not reveal what the part is because we don't give spoilers here on KidLit Love. But there is just such a beautiful moment in the book that makes this one that's just going to stick with me for a while. And I'm so excited that you're here for your debut launch, which I am excited to be a part of. And since it is your debut, I bet there are a lot of listeners that haven't gotten the chance to meet you yet and to know about your work. So let's start with the good old-fashioned introduction. Can you tell listeners a little bit about you and your work and the path you took to get to children's literature today?
Sure. Um, I've always been a writer and a reader and just generally a bookish person. But I also had a lot of other interests, and so I took kind of a very windy path to children's books in particular. And when I kind of explored different areas, and after school, I eventually landed at National Geographic, where I kind of got on a journalism track. And when I left, I stayed. I continued to write for National Geographic and also for different scientific journals and magazines. And so I was interviewing actually a woman who, in the UK where she was based, was using her background in physics she was using art to teach children concepts in physics. And we had a really fascinating conversation. And in our follow-up email, she mentioned a story about a mathematician, a French mathematician from from the 18th and 19th century, who just had this. I'd never heard of her before, and I was fascinated. And so I kind of went down this long research rabbit hole. And, just like as I had done at National Geographic and researching some of my articles, one fascinating fact would lead to another. And I thought I should do something with this. This is such a great story, but I didn't know what I could do with it, what form that would take. And so around the same time, my son was about 2 years old, and I was sort of just getting acquainted with modern picture books, which were very different from the ones that I had grown up with. And at the library, they would have these books, these sort of, I didn't know it at the time, but these narrative nonfiction biographies and picture books about science and nature that used poetic language and had these beautiful illustrations. And something sort of clicked, and I thought, this is the form that it should take. This is perfect. And it turned out somebody had already just very recently published a picture book about about this same mathematician. But at that point, the seed had been planted, and I realized that this was something that I definitely wanted to pursue.
I love that. I love when things just fall into place and you've got that idea. I love rabbit holes. I love following them. And then I also love, as probably my favorite picture book genre, I love narrative nonfiction. Because like you, I just love to learn. I love new facts. I love figuring things out. And there's just something so beautiful about this, pocket-sized, hand-sized gift of knowledge that we can figure out in such a wonderful way. I am so heartbroken though that first idea that must have been a little disappointing when you thought I figured it out and then someone has already done it. But as you said, the seed was what mattered. The seed was
Yeah.
planted for you to keep going. So what did you do next after that?
I think I just sort of mined my research for my previous research for ideas. um, Things were being done with picture books that I realized I hadn't known were possible. And I really thought if I could find a great idea, then I can do something in that vein. But of course, I was just getting started. I had no idea what I didn't know about it. I thought that, being a writer, um, and, and, and a researcher, and knowing how to write these um, science articles, I could just sort of, it would naturally evolve from that and be an extension of that work. But of course, I was very surprised to see that that wasn't actually the case. That picture books and writing for children has its own unique challenges, and that I really had to learn a completely new language, and I did it. I just immersed myself in it all. I really thought that this was something that kind of was the perfect blend of all of the things that I love: poetry and writing creatively, and also all of the wonderful, fascinating nonfiction stories that I was hearing about in my work.
Mhm. And there's a couple of different ways that I've learned on the podcast that people can get into children's literature. And you have a fairly unique way of how you ended up getting an agent and getting published. I would love for you to talk about that.
Sure. So I actually had the idea for Sarang. It was one of my very early ideas, and it was inspired by a story I had read in the New York Times a few years before, but that had come back to mind. And I thought that I would approach it as a nonfiction story, telling of these events that had happened in South Korea. But as I was kind of working out the idea, I realized that it might be better served coming from a child's point of view as I was learning more and more about picture books. And so I had this idea, and I wasn't really sure what to do with it. But I finally wrote a draft, and by chance happened to see that there was coming up soon a contest, PB party, where editors and agents would come and look at a query and some first lines, and request a full manuscript. And I thought, I didn't know if I was ready to sort of jump in, but I thought this is such a great idea, and I really want to see what can happen. So I entered. I became a finalist, which was a huge surprise, and I got many requests from agents and editors, and which was both amazing and overwhelming. So eventually, I signed with my wonderful agent, Lisa Amstutz, with Storm Literary, and the book was acquired by Kate Fletcher at Candlelight Press. So, um, and it's just been wonderful working with everyone, and I'm very grateful to PB Party and everything that brought.
Mhm. It's like redemption for figuring out that this is where you wanted to go, but the idea was taken and then right back full circle with this this opportunity. I can't imagine how that must have felt to have people clamoring for your book and your title. How wonderful.
And I think that every idea lands with the right person.
Mhm.
That we find out very quickly in this business that something that you maybe thought was the exact right thing might not be, because something else is around the corner, because the right thing is waiting. And I've heard that rejection is can actually be a gift, because it's leading you to where you really need to be. And so I always think of it that way, of where I this story, my initial idea was what led me into thinking about picture books, and that's all that that needed to do.
Yeah.
And everything that came after is a result of that. And I'm really grateful for where it's all led.
Mhm. So let's talk about the book. Sarang Saves the School. You already mentioned a little bit of getting the inspiration a little while ago from an article that you've read. I would love for you to tell listeners a little bit about the book and about that inspiration, but with no spoilers, of course, because I want them to have that moment for themselves in the book. So tell us what you can.
Okay, well, I read this article in the New York Times. I was really fascinated by that. Really, I should say, I was moved and inspired by the story. And when it came time to think of children's picture books that I might write, it came to mind because it was so inspiring, and it's an intergenerational story. And there aren't many books, I think, that take place in South Korea. And I thought that it would sort of open up that world, especially a world that's under a lot of pressure right now, and maybe not something that's going to be very common coming up, as this way of life, I should say. And so just kind of opening a window into that was something I was interested in doing.
And I realize I kind of put you between a rock and a hard place of how much you are allowed to say about that article and about that book. Um, and now I'm thinking, okay, how do I say it? But basically, right, there is a rural school, and over time, that school is getting smaller and smaller and smaller until it's at risk of being closed, which of course impacts not only the students and the family, but the community. And something, someone, Sarang, has this wonderful idea um, to save it. And it's in that idea that these beautiful themes, I think, in your story come out, because it is a true story about how to save a school, but it's about those intergenerational relationships. It's about the community. It's about the power of kids to have great ideas and be change makers. It's the power of books and literacy and reading. There's so much in there. I would love to kind of pick your brain a bit about that process, because I'm kind of fascinated at how you said originally you thought it would be a nonfiction picture book, literally about the events, and you switched it to the point of view of a child in a more fictionalized way to appeal to them. And I'd love to know more about that choice you made and the process, because it does make it highly personal and you feel so connected to those characters in the story. So I'd love for you to talk more about how you made that decision and how you did that.
It was a challenge. Finding my way into this story was probably, this is one of the hardest stories that I've worked on, for that reason, because I wanted to be really respectful of the subjects also, and make sure that I was representing events the way that they happened, but also finding a way to tell the story that was child friendly. And so ultimately, fiction was the best way to do that because I could create a character who was really motivated by love
Yeah.
and love for her family and for her town as well because making a move, for instance, if your school were to close and you had to move, your family had to make different choices. It's This is all very affecting, and it's not just about changing homes, but at a certain point she mentions just really loving her town and not wanting to leave and have to say goodbye to everything that she knows. And so I thought that showing this as not just affecting and also not affecting just the children, but her family as well, her parents, her extended family, and um, it just seemed that if I could, rather than approach it broadly as this happened to a group of people, just shining the spotlight on one family would really bring it closer.
Hmm. And it did. It did. Like there are books that I read that I love, and there are books that I read that I feel like are emotional, but then there are some books that just kind of get inside, right? It's they just touch you in such a way. And probably because of my love of education, of books, and of course, my own community, my own family, this book just lands. It lands so beautifully and so emotionally. And part of that, of course, is the way that you portray it and the words you use, even some of the structure that you play with in the beginning and the end that comes full circle so nicely. But I want to make sure I mention those illustrations too. The illustrations are so beautiful and so inviting, and the emotion that is conveyed on the characters' faces is just so striking. I'd love if you could talk about how that process came to be, of how you were paired together and what you think of the illustrations and how it supports your words.
So I was provided with a list of illustrators and their portfolios, and Juan's work really stood out to me because it had a different look and feel, and it was very um, cheerful and friendly, and I just really loved her work, and so she said yes to doing the book, which I was very happy about. And then throughout the process, I was able to see sketches and ultimately very exciting the final artwork, which was I was amazed because she really brought this small community to life. At
Yes.
the I feel like her details are just so perfect, from inside the little store to the being by the sea, and there are little kind of nice touches throughout, where you see maybe some magpies, which are considered lucky in Korea, and other little touches that you see throughout that really bring this this world to life
Mhm.
that might not be familiar to a lot of readers, but
And
it instantly feels like just a wonderful place to be.
it does. It does. It brings that emotion to the reader. The other part that I really loved was the way that the pages alternated. So some of the pages had these, beautiful full color backgrounds with that lovely detail and emotion. And then at certain pivotal points of the story, the background would change to white and there would be a literal spotlight
Hmm.
just showing these beautiful turning points or important moments in the story. And I feel like it just so beautifully worked with what was happening in the story that it just propelled you like closer, closer to the book. It was such a beautiful pairing. It's really lovely.
Thank you. I was really happy the way it all came together.
Mm. Now, this is your debut novel and releasing in July, right? which is exciting. Um, I would love to know, especially as a debut author with your first book going into the world, not your first piece of writing, certainly, but your first picture book going into the world. What are your hopes? What are your hopes for the book? What are your hopes for readers who get the chance to hang on to it?
I hope that they're as inspired by this story as I was, and I hope that that's the case for children and the grown-ups who are reading it alongside them or reading it to them as well, because I really think that it is a story that can speak to multiple generations. I came to writing picture books um, somewhat late. I don't know. I had had a career before. Was a bit surprising direction for my life to take, and I think embracing that and that's maybe what really moved me about the story was the courage of these women to do something that they might not have ever thought they would have the chance to do, and to not let anything sort of get in the way of fulfilling this dream of actually taking this opportunity to do that. And I think a lot of people can relate to that, young or old. The idea that um, as it says, it's never too late, and it's never too early for children to have ideas that can really make a difference.
Mm. I love that. It's never too late, but it's also never too early. It's just this beautiful invitation, no matter how old you are. And as you know on this podcast, I think everybody, young and old and older, should be reading children's literature. And you're right, this book is a good example of how it has that intergenerational link in it, and it can touch many people. I think educators specifically, librarians specifically, are going to love this. And it's the perfect time to launch it because school's getting started. And what a perfect way to celebrate we are here and we are able to be here. We get to be here together in this school community.
Yes, and I actually think that that's something that runs through this as well, as this idea that if you're a child in school, if you're an adult who's had a wonderful education, this is not something to take for granted, because it's not, even now, not available to everyone, and certainly in the past it wasn't. And so this is a little bit of a reminder too that we're all very fortunate to be able to go to school. It seems it's as simple as that, and it's hasn't always been the case for everyone, and it's it's something that's so valuable, but it also can seem like an everyday thing that we just take for granted.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. It is something that many of us take for granted, or as kids, many of us don't appreciate until you realize just how lucky we are to get access to that, and hopefully appreciate it a bit more. I think your book definitely brings people that gift. Thankfully, you have another book coming out as well, right? So Sarang Save the School is book one. Give us a sneak peek of the next book that's coming out for you.
So, my second book is A Handbook for Hannah, and this is also from Candlewick, illustrated by Jamie Kim. And it's about a young girl who is living in a community that has sort of a city that has a large Korean American community. And so she's able to sort of be in touch with that, with her culture and events and celebrations and customs and family as well. And then she and her mom move to a smaller community that doesn't have as many of those sort of cultural touchstones that she's used to, and how she adjusts to that as the Chuseok festival is approaching in the fall, and some of the things that she has to do to adjust to her new home.
I can't wait for it. I can't wait for it. I loved this one so much. I know whatever books come next for you are going to be just as beautiful. So I'm glad we get to celebrate your debut, but we also know that another book is coming. Congratulations. It's
Thank
exciting.
you. I am very excited.
So where can listeners find you online so that they can connect with you or find your books, all the things? Where's the best place to find you?
You can go to my website, KorenaHowley.com. I'm on Instagram at Korena Howley and on Blue Sky at Korena. And my book, Sarang Saves the School, it's currently available for pre-order wherever books are sold.
And I've learned through this podcast just how important pre-orders are. So listeners, if this book sounds like something you want, pre-order it. That really does help in getting the word out. Thank you so much for coming on and letting us be part of your launch. It's a beautiful book. I know listeners are going to love it, and I'm so grateful that we had the chance to have this conversation.
Thank you so much, Stephanie.
And listeners, thank you for listening to another episode of KidLit Love, and I will see you in the next one. Thanks for listening to today's episode of the KidLit Love podcast. You'll find links to all of the books, resources, and ideas mentioned in the show notes and at alitlife.com. You'll also find KidLit Love on Substack. That's where you'll find posts for each episode, monthly KidLit roundups, and an invitation to join my summer book club and go deeper into the world of children's literature. And if you loved this podcast and want more, you might like to listen to my other podcast called Get Literate. It's a podcast that explores all things books and reading, notebooks and writing to build a life you love. One more thing. If you love what you listened to today, please take a moment to rate and review the podcast, or take a screenshot of the episode and text it to a friend. This helps the podcast grow and builds our bookish community of KidLit Love. Thanks for listening.